Thought you'd finally escaped Duskmourn? Valgavoth isn't the sort to let go of his prey. There are 30 new cards coming to Magic the Gathering Arena in Duskmourn Alchemy. These cards come out on October 15th and will be playable in Alchemy, Historic, Timeless, and Brawl. I'm Amy the Amazonian, and in this video I'll be going over all 30 new cards, starting with 2 legendary creatures. Effie, Fast Learner, is a green and white human survivor who, like the other survivors on Duskmourn, has a triggered ability which triggers during your second main phase if it's tapped. It also has Enlist, an ability that allows you to tap another creature you control who does not have Summoning Sickness when Effie is declared as an attacker, in order to add that creature's power to Effie's until end of turn. This plays into the card's Survival ability, which puts a +1/+1 counter on each tapped creature you control, and seeks a random survivor card with a mana value less than or equal to the number of tapped creatures you control from your library, and puts it into your hand. Effie rewards you for playing survivors, giving you a way to tap them, and she grows your creatures. Effie also works well with Convoke abilities, vehicles, and other cards which tap or reward you for tapped creatures, like Buxton, Scene of the Crime, or Amara. Ethrimic, Imagined Fiend, is a friend to an empty battlefield. If Ethrimic is the only creature you control when it enters, you manifest Dread, and all other creatures you control get +1/+1 while it's in play. This creature isn't able to attack or block until it's alone on your side of the board, but when it is a 4-mana creature with 5 power and toughness, so it can get in a lot of damage. Improvising Aerialist is similar to Duskmourn's Acrobatic Cheerleader, but this card perpetually grants itself and the topmost creature in your library flying if it's tapped at the start of your second main phase. If your deck is packed with survivors, this can make it easier for the next one in your deck to attack and get its own survival trigger. Mothlight Processionist is an eerie addition to enchantment decks, giving your enchantment spells, including enchantment creatures, Convoke, and getting more copies of Mothlight Processionist into hand when an enchantment enters or a room is unlocked. The extra copies must be played that turn, but with a commander like Victor in Brawl, this card could give you the ability to cast even more enchantments per turn, then reanimate discarded copies of the Mothlight Processionist. If you're looking for enchantments to trigger your creatures with Eerie or Constellation, Solitary Study and Endless Corridor let you go deeper and deeper and deeper into Duskmourn. For 2 mana, Solitary Study gives your creatures an additional power, and Endless Corridor gives a creature first strike until end of turn while making an additional copy of the enchantment into your hand. Combining this with a card which discounts your enchantments in rooms, like Inquisitive Glimmer, and a card like the aforementioned Mothlight Processionist means you can build up a board full of creatures and enchantments. You can use this to draw cards off an entity tracker, make tokens with Gremlin Tamer or Ghostly Dancers, or make your creatures even stronger with an Optimistic Scavenger. Housemeld is exiling creature removal in blue that also gives you control of the exiled card, but removes that card's types and turns it into an enchantment. This is incredibly versatile, as it will give you any entering effects or static abilities of the exiled creature, and it gives you an enchantment which can trigger your eerie effects or be later animated using a card like Zur, Eternal Schemer. You should consider this card for many decks and circumstances, as it can generate some incredible swings in power. As an example, it can remove an indestructible creature like Toski while granting you that draw ability, or make a copy of a card which triggers each turn like Coma, or grant you a powerful entering ability while taking out a Primeval Titan, fetching you 2 lands, and taking away a powerful creature. Lurker in the Deep, like the Overlords, has Impending, which is an alternate casting cost that allows you to cast the card as an enchantment that will become a creature once its time counters are removed. When Lurker in the Deep enters or attacks, you seek a non-land card, and whenever you seek 1 or more cards during your turn, you conjure a duplicate of that card and manifest it, turning it into a 2/2 face-down creature. Card advantage and board advantage in a fishy package. Though the manifested card may be turned face up for its mana cost if it's a creature card, you can also return it to hand using a spell or ability to cast it later, or use Hauntwood Shriekers to turn it face up for 2 mana, or Etrata to cast it for 4 mana. This card also looks like a strong addition to Vexir, Iktikik's Heir, a Brawl commander that rewards you for repeatedly seeking cards. Some survivors want all the enchantments to themselves. Glimmer Hoarder is a 2-mana 2/2 which lets you draft a card from its spellbook if it's tapped at the start of your second main phase, at the cost of 1 life. All the cards in its spellbook are made to be enchantments in addition to their original types, though some of them were enchantment creatures to begin with. Glimmer Hoarder's spellbook includes Angel of Suffering, Ephemia the Cacophony, Baelmerk Leech, Chitinous Crawler, Defiler of Flesh, Gravebreaker Lamia, Mindrack Harpy, Puppet Razor, and Starving Revenant. Many of these creatures care about the cards in your graveyard, while others add cards to your graveyard, or care about enchantments, or in the case of Defiler of Flesh, casting black permanent spells. With a versatile set of spells in its spellbook, Glimmer Hoarder is an interesting way to add more enchantments into your hand. Fear of Ridicule is a menacing enchantment creature, which can remove creature cards from your opponent's library and make copies of them for you. Whenever one or more enchantment creatures you control deal combat damage to an opponent, Fear of Ridicule exiles a random creature from your opponent's library and conjures a copy of that creature into play under your control. The copied creature enters as a 1/1 enchantment creature, but still keeps all other types and abilities, and they also gain Menace while Fear of Ridicule is in play. Since you can use the copied creatures to continue triggering Fear of Ridicule's ability, you can pick out pieces of your opponent's strategy and take it for yourself without risking this creature in combat. The copies and Fear of Ridicule also trigger any eerie abilities you may have. Power comes at a cost with Razor Demon. This is a 3-mana 7/7 flyer with Ward, discard a card. But casting it gives your opponent a free-to-cast copy of their choice between Demonic Bargain, which can search the library for a card after exiling the top 13 cards, Ever After, which reanimates 2 creatures from their graveyard, and Demonic Pact, which gets damage, life gain, discard, draw, and an eventual game loss if you let it stick around for too many turns. Though none of those are enough to remove the Razor Demon, they can help even the playing field against such a strong creature. Because the card's ability is on cast, your opponent will still get the drafted card even if Razor Demon is countered, so time your spell casting carefully. It also means that reanimating Razor Demon is all upside. Replicating Terror would be one way to take out the Razor Demon without triggering its ward ability. For 1 black and 1 colorless mana, this spell makes each opponent sacrifice a non-token creature at instant speed, then conjures a duplicate of that creature into your graveyard to be used for reanimation, or to add more cards into your graveyard for Descend, Delirium, or Threshold. Welcome the Darkness is a spell which you might want to wait to cast. It costs X and 1 black mana, and you draw X cards and create an XX black flying demon creature token, and then you set your life total to X and can no longer gain life during the game. If your life total is less than X when you cast the spell, it will still be set to the higher life total, but that's the last life you'll be gaining for the rest of the game. Even with limitations on life gain, this gives you an instantaneous board presence, even allowing you to create the demon token during combat for a surprise blocker. And it gives you an evasive creature to take out your opponent before they can take away the rest of your life total. If you need to get a card into your graveyard, or if the cards in your hand aren't quite right for the circumstances, Anguished Recollection lets you discard a card to seek 2 cards from your library that don't share a type with the discarded card. This gives you some control over the types of cards you put into hand, especially if you discard a card with multiple types, such as an artifact creature or enchantment land. Crude Abattoir and Unsavory Kitchen are 2 more rooms which work together to remove your opponent's creatures and strengthen the creatures in your hand. For 1 red mana, the Crude Abattoir deals 2 damage to a creature, and the Unsavory Kitchen gives a perpetual +2/+0 and haste to a creature in your hand whenever you deal non-combat damage to a creature. Depending on the order you unlock these rooms, you can use them to enable each other, or just use them with other cards or additional copies of these rooms to stack additional buffs. It's also worth noting that the Unsavory Kitchen doesn't care whose creatures you're damaging, so cards like Pyroclasm, which hit every creature in play, could cause a major stack of bonuses to pile up in your hand. Verdant Dread is a 2-mana green enchantment, which manifests dread when it or another permanent sharing its name enters. There's always more dread to manifest if you have mana to spare, because for 5 mana, you can conjure another copy of Verdant Dread into the battlefield, which will trigger all of your copies of Verdant Dread for additional instances of Manifest Dread. And if a grove of manifested cards weren't enough, Harrowing Swarm is a 2-mana sorcery which manifests Dread, then makes it cost 2 mana less to turn your face-down creatures face up, and gives them an additional +1/+1 counter when they're turned over. Manifest Dread often leaves you with extra lands in the graveyard, and the Wary Zone Guard can bring back one of those lands each turn. This survivor enters the battlefield tapped, making it easy to get its ability to trigger on the turn it comes into play. If Wary Zone Guard is tapped at the beginning of your second main phase, you can return target land from your graveyard to the battlefield untapped, and Wary Zone Guard gets a perpetual +1/+1. It does take some work to get lands into your graveyard, but Fabled Passage is the perfect piece in Alchemy to sacrifice and then bring back into play with this creature. Moving on to multicolored cards, Fear of Change is a blue and green nightmare, which brings chaos to the battlefield. When this creature enters or dies, you exile another creature you control and conjure a random creature with a mana value 2 greater than the exiled creatures onto the battlefield. You'll never know what you may find when you face Fear of Change. Poltergeist is a simple but effective way to heist your opponent's cards. Poltergeist is a red and black spirit creature which heists on attack, allowing you to choose between 3 non-land cards from your opponent's library and exiling that card for you to cast later for mana of any color. Not only does this give you card selection, but Poltergeist is also protected by a ward cost of 2 life. Mangled Soul Rager is another spirit, this time in blue and red, which plays with the power and toughness of the creatures in play. When Mangled Soul Rager enters the battlefield, you switch the power and toughness of each creature, making this a 4-power, 1-toughness creature with flying. It also gives you a boon which will switch the power and toughness of the next 12 creatures which enter the battlefield under your control. This lets you turn toughness into power, making cards like Essence of Antiquity into strong attackers. For 3 mana, or 2 mana if you weren't the starting player, Unnatural Summons manifests Dread, then lets you manifest Dread again on your next upkeep through Rebound. This builds up face-down creatures quickly, and can be combined with the other Manifest Dread synergy in blue or green, getting you more cards in hand with Paranormal Analyst or Oblivious Bookworm. And where would we be without a soul-powered motorbike? Soul Shredder is a 2/2 vehicle with haste for 2 mana and a crew cost of 1, and it grows bigger each time creatures die, even if it's in the graveyard. For 1 mana and 2 creatures, Soul Shredder can drive back onto the battlefield, getting more power and toughness with the sacrifice made to bring it back. The last set of cards in Duskmourn Alchemy call back to the creatures of Bloomburrow, with 8 different Glimmers, each representing a different woodland creature type from that set, starting with Eager Flame Guide, a 3-mana red raccoon Glimmer, which refunds 3 colorless mana when it enters play. Those 3 mana can only be used for creature spells, but Eager Flame Guide can also help you find more creatures when it dies by exiling the top 2 cards of your library and allowing you to cast creatures from among those cards. Chittering Illuminator is a 3-mana green squirrel, which may be cast from the top of your library. It also allows you to see and cast other creature cards from the top of your library once it's in play. Gilded Ambusher is a 3-mana black and red lizard with 4 power, 2 toughness, and an ability which forces your opponents to exile permanents and take direct damage. When Gilded Ambusher attacks, you may sacrifice another non-land permanent, and if you do, each opponent exiles a non-token, non-land permanent they control, and another random non-land card from their library. Then they take damage equal to the total mana of the cards exiled this way. Even a single attack from this lizard could deal enough damage to end the game if the cards exiled have a high enough mana value. Enduring Friendship continues the cycle of Glimmers with an adorable pair of otters. Enduring Friendship is a 2-mana, 2/1 creature with Double Team, meaning that you conjure a copy of it into hand when it attacks, then both copies lose their Double Team ability. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, enchantment creatures and otter creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. And, like other Enduring Glimmers, when Enduring Friendship dies, it is returned to the battlefield as an enchantment so it can continue to play with your other otters like Elenia and Indress. Golden Sidekick is a 2-mana 2/2 bat Glimmer with flying and lifelink, making it a great addition to the life gain bats archetype which appeared in Bloomburrow. Whenever you gain life, a random creature card in your hand perpetually gets power and toughness equal to the amount of life gained. And bats aren't the only cards which care about life totals. Golden Sidekick seems like a great addition to a black and white life gain deck. Mischievous Lookout gives you a way to recast non-creature permanents from your graveyard, but does so by turning those non-creatures into rats. This ability is a great way to recur milled or destroyed permanents like planeswalkers, enchantments, or artifacts. Because the change into a rat is perpetual, once a card has been brought back once by Mischievous Lookout, you won't be able to do it again, though you will be able to reanimate those cards using creature reanimation. Rats aren't the only rodents skittering around Duskmourn. Valiant Emberkin is a 3-mana red and white mouse glimmer with 1 toughness and 1 power and haste. Whenever this creature enters or attacks, you give a target creature you control a perpetual boost to its power. And when you cause an ability to trigger by targeting a creature, that ability triggers a second time. This combination of abilities is perfect to pair with heroic creatures and the valiant abilities of your other mice. The last of these glimmers, and the last card in Duskmourn Alchemy, is Wingbright Thief. This blue-white bird reveals the non-land cards in your opponent's hand, so you can alter one of them to your benefit. The card you choose perpetually gains. When you cast the spell, each opponent gains 3 life and draws a card, discouraging your opponent from casting that card and rewarding you with life gain and card draw. This would be a fitting card in a Blink deck or under the wing of Castrel the Wind-Crested. With all 30 new cards from Duskmourn Alchemy revealed, your enchanting, eerie, and dreadfully fun decks are sure to have some new cards to play with. If you'd like to find more of my content, you can find me at twitch.tv/Amazonian or youtube.com/Amazonian. I make Magic the Gathering content with a focus on Draft and Brawl, and I have a series of videos with over 350 Brawl decks on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching this video, and enjoy the new set!